So students, after we have gone through the events, the sequence of events from the story about grandfather and Python. So here, after this, we will go through the detailed study of the story according to the paragraph. So the story grandfather and the Python, here at the very beginning, there in the first page of the story, you will get it's written there, here is a tale about a grandfather's love for all sorts of animal, an indulgent mother's injunction, and an aunt's adventure with a drawn python. So there you will see in your books the pages. I believe you people have opened the story there. So in the first line here, which is written in the red color, you will see. So this is a tale about grandfather's, that means the narrator's grandfather's love for all sort of animal or animal life. And on the other hand, the narrator's grandmother, her description is given here, an indulgent grandmother's injunction. So this particular part, it's only about this story. This particular part tells us about what was her view or what was her gesture soon after seeing the python on grandfather's neck. So here, injunction means the moment she saw the python on grandfather's neck, she gave one strict order, as we discussed about it earlier in the previous session, that the moment she noticed that grandfather was trying to get the python dangled in his neck, by seeing it, she right at once gave one strict order to remove it from her neck. If not, then he might get strangled. So there, the line, it says an indulgent grandmother's injunction. That means a strict order to remove the that dangled python from grandfather's neck. And an aunt's adventure with a thrown python. Aunt Mabel, as I told you earlier, Aunt Mabel was about to visit to the narrator's grandfather's home. So there comes in few of the events, in few of the, previously we discussed, you might have come across that her adventure with the python was quite humorous. Like the whole incident, seeing the python first in the guava tree, after that seeing the python in front of the dressing table, next discovering the python under the pillow. So we will come across all these things in the story itself. So let's go through the story. So first one, here the beginning, it comes as the grandmother was tolerant of most birds and animals, but she drew the line at reptiles. Okay, that means grandmother, she can bear, she can tackle of most birds and animals, but when the question comes about reptiles, she is very much strict in that. Here in this line, you can, if you want, if you can underline this part of the sentence, but she drew the line at reptiles. That means if someone is going to ask about reptiles, then from a far distance she will say strictly, she will say no to reptiles. That means she is scared or she don't like reptiles at all. She said they made her blood run cold. Understood? By seeing that reptiles, She felt nervous. Even a handsome, sweet-tempered chameleon had to be given up. Now the question is, how a chameleon can be handsome and sweet-tempered? So here the author, he gave these words, handsome, sweet-tempered chameleon. That means the chameleon which is not harmful. But in normal cases, what we usually notice that a chameleon, soon after seeing it, we presumes that the chameleon must be a dangerous one, even though it is not harmful. We are not certain whether we are not sure whether the chameleon is harmful or not, but just by its look, just by its attire, just by its physical structure, it makes us believe that it is quite dangerous. So, if someone talks about reptile, then grandmother can never bear anything related to the reptile family. No doubt, even if it's a harmless chameleon. For her, she cannot bear even a chameleon. Grandfather should have known that there was little chance of being allowed to keep the python. So, narrator said that even though grandfather knew about grandmother's view on reptiles, still then he might have in his mind a notion that maybe the chance of keeping the python at home was very little, or the grandmother may or may not be allowed. So he must make up his mind previously before bringing that python back home. Now it was about 4 feet long, a young, when grandfather bought it from snake charmer for 6 rupees, impressing the bazaar crowd by slinging it across his shoulder and walking home with it. Now here you'll have to note down, keep in mind very clearly, it's the little detail about the python. Even though it's little, but it's very important detail. And the detail is, first, the size of the python, that is 4 feet long. And it was a young python, and which grandfather bought it from a snake charmer for 6 rupees. Remember that, a young python of 4 feet long, and the grandfather bought it for 6 rupees, impressing the bazaar crowd by slinging it across his shoulders and walking home with it. Now, grandfather, after while he was on his way back to his home, slinging the python, that means carrying the python around his neck, he was trying to boast himself in front of the crowd of the bazaar, the other people who were there in the bazaar. He was trying to boast himself. Now, grandmother nearly fainted at the sight of the python curled round grandfather's throat. So it is obvious, if you are going to see a person carrying a serpent around his or her neck, the first thing it will come to our mind that the person is going to die very soon, or the serpent, whatever snake it might be, it will strike the person who is carrying it or who is dangling it on his neck. So soon after seeing that, grandmother nearly fainted. And you will be strangled, she cried. Get rid of it at once. So she warned with a very stern voice to grandfather that this python may strangle you. That means you will die out of suffocation. Maybe the python is going to curl up on your neck and it will put pressure, and due to that pressure you will get suffocated and you will die. Nonsense, said grandfather. He is only a young fellow. He will soon get used to us. Now, in that remark of grandmother that the python might strangle, grandfather was very seriously and very with a serious note, he said, nonsense. Don't you know that the python is very young and he will soon get used to us? That means he will be very much familiar with us. This python is not going to cause me any kind of harm. So this Till here, we got about the appearance of grandfather, how he came back from the market, dangling the python on his neck. Next, the size of the python, as well as the price of the python that with what he bought from the snake charmer, and his boasting in front of the crowd of the market. And soon after seeing the python round the neck of grandfather, what was grandmother's view at that moment? The moment she saw that the grandfather was coiling up the python on his neck, she soon asked him very strictly to take it up. If not, then he might get strangled. So here next part we will see, will he indeed, said grandmother. Will he indeed means when grandfather said that he will soon get very much familiar with us. So in that she put a question, will he indeed, said grandmother. But I have no intention of getting used to him. You know quite well that your cousin Mabel is coming to stay with us tomorrow. She will leave us the minute she knows there's a snake in the house. Now, grandmother tried to convince grandfather from in every way, that some way, somehow to get rid of that snake. So she said, I don't have any kind of intention, or I'm not interested whether the python is going to get used to us or not. That means we will be familiar, whether the python will be familiar with us or we will be familiar with the python. I am not interested in that thing anymore. But you must get concerned that your cousin Mabel is coming to stay with us tomorrow. That means the next day, Aunt Mabel, which I told you earlier, she was about to come to their home for staying with them. And grandmother said that soon after she knows that there is a snake in our house, she will leave. She is not going to stay. Well, perhaps we ought to see it to her as soon as she arrives, said grandfather, who did not look forward to fuzzy Aunt Mabel's visit any more than I did. The narrator, he was interested on the arrival of Aunt Mabel, but the grandfather was the only person in that home who dislikes, in some way, he dislikes the arrival of Aunt Mabel. Maybe he don't like Aunt Mabel that much, or maybe Aunt Mabel happens to be quite fuzzy, who creates issues in small things. Maybe she was not very much into with the condition their home was, their family was, or whatever. So he said, if it's going to be like that, soon after seeing the python, if she is going to leave the home, then that will be very good. If the moment she comes, if it's possible, then I will show her the snake. So he was making it in a funny way. He make it in a ironical way to make Aunt Mabel leave the home soon because of her fuzzy behavior, fuzzy nature. So at that, grandmother said, you will do no such thing, said grandmother. Well, I can't let it loose in the garden, said grandfather with an innocent expression. Yeah, it's true. Like, you cannot no doubt, it's a young python, it's just a 4 feet long, and soon it's going to be accustomed to the family members. But it doesn't mean that you will lose the python stray there in the garden, because it might find its way into the poultry house, and then where would we be? And if we are going to lose the python there in the garden, or just cut it loose, then what will happen? It might find a poultry there, find its way to the poultry, and at the time what will happen? The python may eat all there, whatever it's there in the poultry farm, right? Like hen, cock, or whatever. How exasperating you are, grumbled grandmother. Lock the creature in the bathroom. Now here, listening to this, grandmother said, "How exasperating you are." That means how much disturbed you are, how much confused you are. Grumbled grandmother. She was very much angry by seeing the expression and the doings of grandfather. So she gave one order as well as an idea that lock the creature in the bathroom. She wanted her grandfather to lock the python in the bathroom. Go back to the bazaar and find the man you bought it from and get him to come and take it back. Now, grandmother gave one strong order that first you lock the snake, lock the python there in the bathroom. After that, you go back to the bazaar, fetch that snake charmer, ask him to come back home and take this python back with him. In my awestruck presence, grandfather had to take the python into the bathroom where he placed it in a steep-sided tin tub. Then he hurried off to the bazaar to look for the snake charmer while grandmother paced anxiously up and down the veranda. When he returned looking crestfallen, we knew he hadn't been able to find the man. So grandfather, he locked the python and placed it in a steep-sided tin tub. That means one bathing tub, old one. Then he hurried off to the bazaar. He went back to the bazaar to fetch the snake charmer. And in that meantime, there was no any work for grandmother because she was very much anxious. She was very much worried. She was very much angry. And she couldn't do anything, but she paced anxiously up and down the veranda. She was just walking up and down the veranda. Why? When he returned looking crestfallen, that means grandfather, when he returned back from the shop, he was totally worried and he was a bit weird because he couldn't find the snake charmer there in the market. So here it goes again. You had better take it away yourself, said grandmother in a relentless mood. Leave it in the jungle across the river bed. Now, grandmother again instructed grandfather to take the python by his own and to leave it in the jungle across the nearby river. All right, but let me give it a feed first, said grandfather. See, grandfather, he was very humble, he was very noble, he's very kind towards the python. So he wanted to feed the python first. And producing a plugged chicken, he took into the bathroom, followed in a single file by me, grandmother, and a curious cook and the gardener. So who were there? First of all, grandfather, he said like, okay, fine, now I'm going to leave that python there near the jungle. But before that, let me feed him. So he bought a plugged chicken. He bought a chicken to feed the python. He took the chicken with him. He went to the bathroom and he was followed by, in a single file, that means in a queue, in a line, at once, one by one, who were there? By the narrator's grandfather, and their curious cook who works there, who was the cook of the grandparents' home, and their gardener. Now grandfather threw open the door and stepped into the bathroom. I peeped round his legs while the others remained well behind. We couldn't see the python anywhere. So the moment grandfather opened the door, the narrator, he peeped in round the legs of the grandfather, while others, that means the grandmother, the curious cook and the gardener, they were far behind. And there, the grandfather and the narrator inside the bathroom, they couldn't find out the python. He is gone, announced grandfather. He must have felt hungry. Now he said that the python left the bathroom. Maybe the python was very hungry. I hope he isn't too hungry, I said. That means the narrator said maybe he is not that much hungry. If the python will be very much hungry, who knows, he might end up everything, whatever there in their home. So the narrator, being small, said, I hope he isn't too hungry. We left the window open, said the grandfather, looking embarrassed. So grandfather was quite sorry and a bit careless because he left the window of the bathroom open. A careful search was made of the house, the kitchen, the garden, the stable, and the poultry shed, but the python couldn't be found anywhere. So all of them, all of the family members, they made a careful, quick search around the house. They looked the house, the kitchen, the garden, the stable, and the poultry shed, but the python couldn't be found anywhere. The python was nowhere to find. He will be away by now, said grandfather reassuringly. So grandfather was reassuring the other members of the family that maybe the python he already left away. He is very far. I certainly hope so, said the grandmother, who was halfway between anxiety and relief. Now, what it means, anxiety, she was in the halfway between anxiety and relief. Now grandmother is saying that okay, fine, if the python left far, then it's quite good, and I hope it should be in that way. It's because she was anxious, she was full of anxiety and relief because the python left, and there was anxiety in her. It's because she was worried, who knows, maybe the python popped up again in the family. So they were not sure, they was not certain where the python actually went. So this story, it's quite funny and more interesting, which we will come to know here in this story. But before going further, I want you people to read the story after my explanation and try to read it at least 2 or 3 times continuously, so that it will make you very much clear with what the story actually is supposed to tell us. So the next part, let's go to the next part. So here in the next part, what we get, the next day means Aunt Mabel's arrival. So it's going to be quite interesting now. Now the python was not there, and they were not sure whether the python already left or it going to appear again. And in that dilemma, in that confusion, what happened? The arrival of Aunt Mabel took place. Aunt Mabel arrived next day for a 3-week visit, and for a couple of days grandfather and I were a little apprehensive in case the python made a sudden reappearance. But on the 3rd day, when he didn't show up, we felt confident that he had gone for good. So soon after Aunt Mabel's arrival in the grandparents' home, it means that the python didn't show up till the 3rd day. And when till the 3rd day, when the python didn't show up, so the family members, they were assured that and confident that the python might have gone very far. And then towards evening, we were startled by a scream from the garden. So that 3rd day, in the evening hours, what happened? They were shocked. They were very much frightened with a scream that came from the garden. Seconds later, Aunt Mabel came flying up the veranda steps, looking as though she had seen a ghost. Now what happened? Soon after a moment, they come to know the reason of the scream and the source of the scream. That was Aunt Mabel. She was flying, she was running in a great speed towards the veranda steps. And the way she was running and the way her looks at the time, as if she was chased by a ghost, or maybe she have seen a ghost. In the guava tree, she gasped. I was reaching for a guava when I saw it staring at me, the look in its eyes as though it would devour me. So now Aunt Mabel, she is describing what she saw there in the guava tree of the garden. She was about to reach for a guava, and there she noticed that a pair of eyes were staring at her, and this look the way the pair of eyes were looking at Aunt Mabel as if it's going to devour her. Devour means to eat vigorously. It's going to, like the way a lion devours a deer in a hunt. So in such way, she was giving the description. Come down, my dear, urged grandmother, sprinkling her with eau de cologne. Come down and tell us what you saw. Now, what is eau de cologne? That is kind of perfume or a relief spray at that moment, because she was quite frightened. So she said, okay, fine, come down, be cool, and tell us what you saw there in the garden. A snake, sobbed Aunt Mabel. A great boa constrictor. So she is giving the description of what she have seen there in the garden, in the guava tree. It must have been 20 feet long in the guava tree. Its eyes were terrible. It looked at me in such a queer way. So Aunt Mabel, she exaggerated about what she saw there in the guava tree, and of that exaggeration, she gave a brief description about what she saw there, and that she named it as a great boa constrictor. It's a boa, it's kind of a snake, big snake. So she said that, and the size she exaggerated up till 20 feet, which was earlier, before 3 days, the moment grandfather bought that python from the market, it was 4 feet long. And after 3 days, when Aunt Mabel saw it in the guava tree, it became 20 feet. So is it possible? It is not possible at all. She was shocked, she was frightened, and because of that, she stated out all these things in exaggerating everything what was there in the scene actually. My grandparents looked significantly at each other, and grandfather said, I will go out and kill it, and sheepishly, taking hold of an umbrella, sallied out into the garden. But when he reached the guava tree, the python had disappeared. Now, when grandparents come to know about what she saw, that great boa constrictor, actually they know that that's the python which grandfather bought it from the market. So grandfather, to give a kind of relief to grandmother as well as to Aunt Mabel, he said, okay, fine, don't worry, I'm going to get the snake there and I'm going to kill it. So he took one umbrella and he slipped to the garden. So here grandfather, he was from his inside, he was quite sure that he is going to get the python, and he was a bit happy that he is going to get the python again. Now he will have to do is to grab the python and to leave it, and to keep the python far away there in the jungle. So next what happened? Aunt Mabel must have frightened it away, I said. So soon after, as their grandfather couldn't find the python again in the guava tree, narrator he said that maybe because of the scream of Aunt Mabel, the python disappeared, it go away again. Hush, said grandfather, we must not speak of your aunt in that way. But his eyes were alive with laughter. So now grandfather is quite funny here. He said, no, hush, that means silent. We shouldn't speak about your aunt in that way. But he said it, but in his mind, from his heart, he said, like, yes, because of Aunt Mabel's scream only, the python disappeared from the guava tree again. And this expression came out from his eyes, which were alive with laughter. It usually happens when we are having something in our heart, and when we are speak in other way, so the truth reveals in our eyes, or our feelings, it reveals in our eyes. So the same thing it happened to grandfather. So next what happened? After this incident, the python began to make a series of appearances, often in the most unexpected places, which I told you earlier. Aunt Mabel had another fit of hysterics when she saw him admiring her from under a cushion. She packed her bags, and grandmother made us intensify the hunt. So after that particular incident, the coming up of the python becomes a bit frequent, and in most of the cases it was the places where they could discover the python, they could see the python or popping up the python was not sure and certain. The place were very uncommon. Sometimes it comes out under the cushion, sometimes it comes out in front of the dressing table, sometimes it comes out where in different places which are very rare, like which are very uncertain. We cannot hope that the python might come in that particular place. So what happened? After seeing one incident, what happened? The pythons make a series of appearance, most often in some most unexpected places, which I told you earlier. Aunt Mabel, she got shocked once again, and she was in another fit of hysterics. She was totally frightened. She was very shocked when Aunt Mabel saw that the python was staring at her from under a cushion. Next morning, and because of that, Aunt Mabel, not from the same paragraph I'm saying, because of that appearance, Aunt Mabel made up her mind not to stay in that house anymore. So she packed her bags and everything, and she was about to move. And because of that, grandmother, she cleared a war-like situation, that whatever it is, you'll have to find out the python and have to get rid of it. And her instruction, her orders were very strict. So students, till here, till this paragraph, we have done for this session, and in the next session we are going to continue this again. So till then, thank you.